So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming here. Thanks for the interest in workflow. What's always interesting for me, does anybody of you already have experience with other workflow engines? Okay, that's a lot. With BPMN? Not that much. Okay, that was actually half the audience. So my plan today, or maybe I start first things first. Who am I? Who is Camunda? Camunda, we are a small company. We are based in Berlin. We have a subsidiary in San Francisco. We are currently approximately 30 people. We're pretty much growing at the moment. We don't have any venture capital. That's maybe interesting. And we deliver an open source BPM platform. That's actually what we do. And there, I have these two images of the, basically, because we already were asked a lot of times yesterday at the booth, what is the unique selling point of Camunda? What makes you unique? And I think these two pictures are basically the core of it. The first thing is what we do is we have a very lightweight BPM platform. It's more kind of a framework-like approach. I will show that later on. And we do something we call developer-friendly BPM. So if you think of BPM, a lot of people out there are thinking of these, what is that big, heavy black box here of zero-code BPM suite, of something which is really, really a pain for the developer. And we try to do that very different in a developer-friendly kind of way. I will show that later on in the demo. And on the other hand, we care a lot about BPMN. BPMN, we will see some examples on the slides later on. BPMN is the standard. I have this nice poster here. If you want to get some copy of the poster, we have it at the booth. BPMN is an ISO standard. So worldwide, it's really adopted by basically all the vendors and by basically all the customers. So nowadays, if you start modeling processes, you normally use BPMN. And BPMN is pretty cool because you can model processes for documentation or for analysis, and you can execute them. So the BPMN standard defines how to execute BPMN models on a process engine. And that's why it's so cool. And that helps us a lot for basically facilitating the transparency and communication between business and IT. We wrote a book on that. It's available in English, Spanish, and German. That might be interesting as well. And my name is Ben Drücker. I'm one of the two founders of Camunda. I have a long experience in workflow and basically Java EE. I wrote an EJB book like 8 years ago, something like that. So I'm basically, with the start of my professional life, I started workflow in the Java world. Yeah, you can reach out to me via email or Twitter or whatever. So that's what I get. Yeah, we have a booth in the third floor. You will find that there. I think that's easy to get. So today we want to basically, my plan is to do a lot of live demo. Okay, so that you really can see how a process engine in Java really feels like. And I want to do something from scratch. I wanted to lay a common ground that might be a bit boring for a couple of you who already know BPMN, but I think it's worth the time to invest. So that's, I think, the classical example for a process or for a workflow. It's a vacation request, right? So you want to go on a vacation. That might kick off a new process instance. We call it process instance. That's a BPMN model, by the way. So that's a start event. The start event means here the process instance starts. Then we have these tasks. This is a user task. That means, okay, there is some user who has to do something. In this case, I wanted the boss of the employee should approve the vacation. Okay, so he needs some kind of task list where you can see if he should approve that or not, maybe some data, some form, and some possibility to enter something, the approval, yes or no, and some button to finish it, for example. And then we have that gateway. That's a so-called XOR gateway exclusive, so we go either that way or the other. And if we go the yes path, for example, we might book that on some leave account, we send a notification, and we're done. That's an end event. Very easy example, right? The BPMN process. If you have any question, let me know. I think that's possible to do questions while the talk here. So that's a classical example, but it's actually a very, very simple process, right? So at the customers, we are normally not doing vacation requests because vacation requests is really, really easy one. We are doing more complex one. I have a couple of examples here. That's an interesting one. It's counterparty onboarding. So if you have a new supplier, for example, and you want to onboard him, you have to clarify a lot of you need tax forms, you maybe need some information from him, depends if he's in the same country or not, and all these kind of things. So you need a couple of approvals. So that might be already be a bit bigger here. That's one of my favorites, because we are allowed to show it, actually. We have a lot of these processes from customer, but most of them we are not allowed to show. That's a BPMN process as well, and it's for credit card issuing. It's a German bank, actually. If you get a new credit card there, you basically run through that process, okay? This is the customer here, and that's the really the executed process in the background. That's run by a process engine, so that's completely automated. This step, then this, then this, then this. So what we're currently looking at are core processes of different industries. So for Camunda, we don't have any focus in a special industry. We have basically all the industries. There are a lot of projects in banking and finance, because for them, BPM processes are pretty natural. And at least in Germany, they're still, the smaller ones are still using a lot of paper, so they have some pressure to automate, to make that more efficient. And just to name some examples, I don't want to name the customers, I want to name the processes, that you get an idea what you can do with process execution. For the Allianz, for example, it's in Allianz Asia, and there if you have a new insurance, health insurance contract, you run through a process until it's basically issued. Or Zalando, I'm not sure, is Zalando active in UK? I think so. Does anybody know Zalando here? No? It might, yeah, a couple of them. It might not yet be active in UK. It's a German company, but they are expanding all over the world at the moment. They're basically shipping clothes. So it's always a risk to ask in IT guys if they know Zalando. It's basically shoes and then clothes. And, but what they do is every order, if you order something in the web shop, they are processing that by a BPMN process, or whatever might be interesting. That's the patent, the Swiss Patent Office. If you have a new a patent application, you run through the process. We have a couple of telecommunication providers. So if you, for example, buy a new card, or basically tip on some money on your mobile phone, or change the tariff or whatever, that run through BPMN processes as well. Okay. So just to give you an idea of the use cases. So basically processes are everywhere, right? The interesting question is how to implement them. We already had a couple of people using workflow engines, or having used workflow engines in the past. But what I see out there is still this, that you implement it in code, right? And code in the broadest sense. So the example I like best actually is from a big telecommunication provider. What they did is they had an order table. Okay, so basically all the orders go in that table that has a column, which is the order state. And then they had at the end, a big department managing the order states, because they were like 100,000 or something like that. And then they had a lot of like polling mechanisms, small tiny scripts here and there. And if there is the order state 90,500, I am as a script have to do something. And then I write the order state to 100,200 or something like that. So this is how processes are still implemented out there a lot. And this doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because then you cannot see the process within the code. You always have to search for it. And what happens out there is that you have a lot of, or a high frequency of process changes normally. The world is changing fast, so processes have to adapt. What you did with paper like 20 years ago, you might do with your mobile phone automatically tomorrow. And you want to have a quick response. So you're constantly forced to change processes very fast. And that's basically the motivation to really use workflow engines and to use BPMN to have something visible which is really executed, and to be able to discuss that with the business. If you look at BPMN, and I already made a couple of examples, we have basically two use cases. I will show you that in the demo in a minute. So it's what we call user task management or human task management. Task lists, and you want to basically assign the task to the right people. If the people are finished, the engine has to know who is the next one to make the next task and these kind of things. And we have service or system integration, where we automatically call services, like in a service-oriented architecture or whatever it is. Okay, that might be that you completely 100% automate processes. And in the most of the processes, you have a mixture of them too. Makes sense so far, I hope. I tried to make it quick, actually, to introduction. I didn't want to skip it, but I tried to make it quick. But if you have any question, let me know. So what you typically do, you introduce a process engine, or you might want to call it workflow engine. I still make the experience that workflow engine is a bit more known, the term, but it basically is the same. So we have a process engine. What happens with BPMN? I mentioned that in the beginning. When you draw the BPMN, it's not only a picture, I will show you that later on, it's also an XML file in the background. So the model you have, you can store as an XML file, and this XML file can be executed by a process engine directly. So you don't need to map that to a different format, what was done in the past with stuff like BPL or maybe XPDL or proprietary languages. So the idea is you have the BPMN file, you can store it as an XML, and you can execute it directly on the engine. And then you do the human task management, the service integration, and what you get, I will show you that later on with an example, is basically transparency. So you can see how much processes are running, in which step they are. If one is stuck, you can see that. And you might get a lot of KPIs out of it. So if you have any weaknesses in the processes, how long do they take, and these kind of things. That's the basic idea. Okay? Makes sense, I hope. Yeah. Something like that. So what Camunda is doing is a process engine. So we have what we call the CamundaBPM platform. It's an open source project. So you can go to camunda.org, can download the stuff, can start immediately actually. And these are the components we basically ship. And we will see that in the live demo basically on the next slide. So that's my last slide for the demo, just to set the common ground. So the core of it is a process engine. I think that makes sense. It's a BPMN 2.0 based engine, so we are standard compliant. It's written in Java. It's basically a small library, so you don't need anything actually to run it. We just need a database, a relational database. We support a couple of them. And we use Apache MyBase. Not sure if anybody knows that, but that's the only requirement we have. So you might have 2 jars and your JDBC driver, and that's it. So it's pretty lightweight, the core engine. And we see that in a minute. That helps us, for example, to do unit tests very easy. So we can have in-memory unit tests without any infrastructure. That's already pretty cool. Then we have a Java API in order to access the engine. So this can be used in order to start process instances, query the state, and these kind of things. And everything you can do with the Java API, we also provide a REST API for that. So if you're a remote client, you can also use the REST API. Then we have a couple of tools around it. First of all, we have the task list. That's basically for the end user. So you can see your task, you can open forms and these kind of things. And we have Cockpit as a monitoring and operating tool, where you can basically see the state of the process engine, search for instances and these kind of things. What we experience very often in the customer projects is that they don't use the task list. They build their own task list, integrate it in their portal, in their own UI, in the own UI technology you might want to use. That's pretty much okay. That's a common use case actually for us to really build your own custom task list with your custom requirements. It's fine and it's easily doable by using either Java if you're using a Java framework like whatever JSF or Vaadin or whatever, or REST if you're building a HTML5, or it might even be PHP or whatever application. So that's the runtime, and on the modeling time we have an Eclipse plugin. You will see that in a minute for modeling this stuff. We have Cycle. That's something I don't want to stress today, but Cycle is from the idea is that if you have the BPMN file, that can be modeled by a business analyst, maybe in a different tool. You will see the Eclipse modeler. The Eclipse modeler is more for the developer. It's not something a business analyst normally use. We have a couple of, but it's not the normal use case. They have different tools, something which we do not really target. So they have other tools they already have in the company. They're using that. And if they can export BPMN, which is already pretty common, so a lot of the tools like whatever ARIS or Enterprise Architect or yeah, there are a couple of them. They can export BPMN, and then we have the Cycle as a round-trip tool in order to get that into our development environment. And if we change something, we can basically make the full round trip to give it back in the business modeler, that you always have the most accurate current model within the business modeler as well. So that's basically the ecosystem. Okay, let's check the time. I think I was good. Yeah, I think I was good. So we have time for the live demo. And that's actually something where I said, okay, I want to start from scratch. That's maybe the most interesting one because I didn't prepare anything. I really start from scratch, so you can replay that later on if you want to get started. And I use an Eclipse here. Who is fluent in Java? 90%. That's good. Perfect. So I use an Eclipse here. I hope everybody can read it. We do not force you, but it's basically the easiest way is to use Maven in order to get started. We have archetypes for that. I'm not sure if you know archetypes, but basically project templates in Maven. There are different ones. Don't want to go into all the details, so I say I make it easy. I make a QCon project. Where is it? There is it. That's a normal Java project. What we basically do is we include the process model within the normal Java project. And that's what I meant earlier, like with the developer-friendly BPM. So we bring the workflow, the BPM, into the normal development approach, into the normal developer's life. So there's nothing really special about it. So I have a process. I actually, even if I don't like the example, I want to do vacation request because it's pretty quick. So I name it vacation request. Okay, that's an executable process model, yeah. And so what I can immediately do, I can basically draw the process. So I say I start with the event that somebody has a vacation requested, right? So that starts the process instance. The next step might be the approval. So I have this user task. So it's approve vacation request. Oh, sorry, my bad. Not that easy to use the graphical modeling. The approval, after the approval, I want to have the gateway because now I either have approved or not, so I want to react differently, right? So in the case I have approved the vacation request, I make it easy actually now. It might be that I just want to inform employee something. So basically what I wanted to have in the demo is like a user task, a service task, and a gateway. That's why I always like to make that process, right? It's a pretty easy one, I confess. So approved, the question mark, and this is the approved yes. And the other one is the approved no. And I actually just end the process here. Maybe not very realistic, but hopefully okay. Okay. If anybody insists on changing that process, I can do that now. But no, it's fine. Okay, perfect. Sorry. You want to change it or no? Okay. Didn't get it. Completely, so we make that a bit shorter. And after informing the employee, I'm done. So normally we have some conventions on the naming, so it would be good to have something like a vacation approved and vacation requested. But these are details which are not that important at the moment. No, vacation rejected. Okay, I think so far it's pretty easy, and what we did till now might be the result of a business analyst analyzing the process. Might be a bit more complex, but it might be a result. It's not very technical, right? But what we have to do in order to get that executable is we basically add a couple of attributes for executing it. And the first thing we do, that's not really technical, but it's already an attribute we need, is we might want to specify who is approving the request. There could either directly assign that to a user, might be the boss of the guy, could be one option. I make it easy here, I just assign it to the management as a group. So we use groups in order to assign tasks. And the next thing, the interesting part is with the inform employee, that's something I really have to call a service to inform the employee, to sending an email or whatever, right? So the interesting question is, how do I do that? And the easiest way, and actually the most common ways in the project, is we just attach Java code to these service tasks. So what I can do, I have this, we pre-create that logger delegate always. The interesting thing is that you have an interface from us, what we call Java delegate. It has an execute method. And when the process instance later on moves through the process, through that service task, it calls that execute method. And we get a context where we can ask, for example, where we are in the process, data, process variables from the process, and these kind of things. Okay, makes sense. I maybe change that a bit in order that we see what's happening. So I say, hello, QCon. Okay. Then I can, again, different possibilities. The easiest, I just reference that Java class within the process model. I could use a bean name, a CDI bean or Spring bean or different types of things here, but the easiest is just to reference the class name. Makes sense, hopefully. The next thing I have to do is to implement that gateway. So I basically have to tell the engine when to go this way, when to go the other way. And in the BPMN, this is named database gateway. So I basically operate on data I already have in the process. We call that process variables. So let's assume, we will see how that get there. Let's assume we have a process variable approved. Well, it's a Boolean. Then I can easily do that. What we use in the engine is Joule, Java Unified Expression Language. You might know that from JSF or other stuff. It's a de facto standard in the Java world. So we can easily write an expression like, if I have a variable approved, I go this way, and I go the other way if I have not approved that. Okay? You ask if you have any questions. So that's already okay for the moment. The next thing I want to do, which is normally a good idea, if you're developing, you should develop test-driven, I guess. So what I do as the next step is to implement a unit test in order to see if the process model is working. If you're more the visual guy, we are clicking it through in a minute. But the first thing I want to do is really a unit test. And there we have infrastructure for JUnit. So this JUnit rule, don't want to go into a lot of details. What it basically does is it starts up a process engine with the in-memory database in the background. So there's nothing you have to do for that. And then we can write a unit test. Let me show you that. So let's say test happy path, and that's what you normally do. You test different scenarios, paths through the process model. And the happy path, yeah, depends on the boss or the employee, but the happy path normally that the vacation is approved, right? Guess so. So what you can do now is we can use the process engine API. So I have a process engine here. By the way, not sure if that's interesting for you at the moment, but starting a process engine is as easy as saying I want to have, for example, a standalone in-memory process engine configuration. That's how I configure the engine. On this one, I could configure different things like JDBC and all these kind of things. But the easiest thing is just to build a process engine. That's it. It's one line of code, then you have an in-memory process engine. That's it. And that's basically what's done in the test case in the background. So I have that process engine. We have a couple of services to talk to the process engine. That's the API. You will find the same stuff in the REST API, basically. And then I can say, for example, in the runtime service, I want to start a new process instance. Okay. And I have named that vacation request earlier, if you remember that. That's basically the link to what I have in the BPMN file. And what I can always hand over, and that's now interesting because this approved variable I talked to you earlier, what we do is we have a map of process variables which are persistent together with the process instance in the database. So we can hand over a map with variables. We don't have to declare them, we just hand it over. And the easiest way to do that is actually we have a helper to do that. So I can say create variables. I would want to put some value in it. They're approved. We need that later, actually. Don't need that at the moment. Sorry, bear with me. I keep that in mind for the next step, because I don't need it actually to start the process instance, right? When I start the process instance, what happens, it starts in the start state and it basically walks till the user task. A user task is a wait state for us because we have to wait for the user to do the work. That might take days or weeks or whatever. So we persist the state to the database and do nothing then. And this is something we can test now. So when I start my process instance, the next thing which should happen is that, so what we have as well is assertion support. Hopefully, can you read that back there? Yeah, sure. So we have assertion support there, so I can assert that I have a process instance that is started, is not ended, for example, and I can say, okay, this one now has a task. We can name the task actually. That would be maybe a good practice here. So the task is user task approve. So that's the ID of the task in the BPMN file, and I can assert that I'm really in that task now, and I can assert, for example, that no, I only need one of them. That is assigned to a group, which is the management group, if you remember that. We added that in the process model. Yeah, and basically that's it. I can do a lot of asserts. Like I can even assert if I walked through that path and these kind of things. So you can do a lot of asserts if that is what you expected. Okay, and the next thing I can do, I can basically simulate that the user completed the task. So I just call the complete method and hand over the task. That's actually a bit tricky here, but sorry. This task method is a helper in the test case. So this knows, oh, I did an assert on a task, so I use that task in order to complete it. It's a bit of tricks to make the unit test readable. But the interesting thing here is that the unit test is really readable. Maybe not by business folks, okay? But it's really straightforward to read the unit test and make testing easy with the process models. And that's different with most of the, or basically all of the other BPM suites out there. And now I want to hand over my approved variable. Because what happens now, maybe we, if we do unit testing, what's always recommended is let the test fail, right? So if I do the test now, it should fail. Why? That's always it's 10:30 in the morning. Yeah? Because I have this expression here. The expression says approved. But approved is something which is not known in the process at the moment. So what I get is an error, unknown property used, approved. So what I have to do here is I create that map. So these are the variables. And I make it maybe not that fluent. It's easier to follow if it's not that fluent. I add my approved variables, and I hand over that when I complete the task. And then my test case should get green now. And what you can see, we walked through the service task here, so we got the log. Makes sense so far? Hopefully, okay, perfect. That was the more technical background. I hope that already got an impression. Yeah, if you see, we have the engine jar. Yeah, there are a couple of jars I would not need actually in that case. We have my betas. We might use Spring for configuring the engine, but you're not forced to it. So basically, my betas and the engine are the jars you need. So it's really, really easy to get started here. But the next step, the more visual step, is actually if you want to really run that process on a live machine, and you might want to use the tools we have like task list or cockpit. So what I can do, I can just build a var. So we just hook in the normal building life cycle. It's a normal var. There's nothing really special about it. We have a couple of things in here, like a marker file and these things. If you're interested in these details, best is to ask me later on or to come to the booth. But it's more or less a normal var file. So I can copy that. In the background, I have, in my case, I have a JBoss running here, JBoss application server, but it actually doesn't matter which container it is. Must be a Java container. So it could be Tomcat, could be JBoss, could be WebSphere, could be WebLogic, Glassfish. Actually doesn't matter. We have integration into all of them. And what we do then is something which is pretty cool, actually. We run the process engine already as part of the container. So it's basically a service of the container, like transaction management or EJB or these kind of things. And then when we deploy the var file, when it gets deployed and picked up, the container now sees, oh, there's a BPMN file in it. I want to deploy that to my engine, to the database. So there's some magic in the background here. And that leads actually to, and now it gets more visual, if I log into Cockpit and look at my process engine, I now can see my vacation request process. Okay, there's nothing running there at the moment. That's fine, but I already deployed it. And then I can immediately go into the task list, for example. I should be logged on, actually. And for example, I can kick off a new vacation request process. The interesting thing is now, so far, I haven't defined any user interface. What we do there is we provide, if you don't specify anything, we provide this generic one where you can just now add variables. This is actually pretty cool in order to do like quick prototyping. Because if you're in a phase where you do business process analysis, so you're discussing about the process, if you're discussing with, let's say, normal people, they're normally not thinking in process models. But for them, it's easy to think in forms. Okay, I have these 3 forms, one after the other. That's something they can understand. And so it's easy to get started and just basically click through the process. Let's say, okay, for the vacation request, you need to tell me your name. That's maybe a string and burn. And yeah, some more. I will do a form in a minute, so we don't have to care about that now. But you can immediately get started. So I kick off a new process instance. If I go to Cockpit now and refresh that, I see, oh, there's a new process instance, and it's currently waiting in the first user task. So that's the view on all of the process instances. So if I kick off another one, yeah, actually it doesn't matter at the moment. Kick off another one, I have 2 waiting there, right? And then, for example, I can look into one of the process instances. I see, okay, this is where it is at the moment. I can see the variables. Okay, this one doesn't have any variables. Maybe we take the other one. So I see the variables I provided, and I see a couple of other things. Okay, so that's pretty visual as well. The next thing, what you normally do is you provide a user interface. So the easiest thing, again, for rapid prototyping is you can just define the forms you want to see, the fields you want to see on the form. So you could say, I want to have the name, right? And this should be a string. And we might want to provide a start date of the vacation. That might be a start date, and it might be a date. So, okay, that's for having very easy forms. Another possibility, and that's something I actually prepared, because didn't wanted you to watch me writing HTML. But the interesting thing is you can use basic HTML snippets. We can show that in the task list as well, and you could even integrate JavaScript there. So we are running an AngularJS HTML5 application, so we are in an Angular scope, and we have some Angular directives, some integration there. So you can do a lot of things in these embedded forms. So it can be simple HTML, which is actually not that hard to build. So it's not that we are really missing a graphical form builder, but it's really powerful if you like, right? Because you can do basically anything there. And that's an easy approval form. We again have the variable with the name, start date, and these kind of things. And then if I have these kind of form, I can just reference it here. So I can say this could be, it should be shown embedded. It's from the application, so from the var file, and the path is forms proof HTML. So I rebuild that thing. And maybe one thing I wanted to change in the process model, just to show it, because that's, so far the process is not really powerful. But what you can easily do with BPMN, for example, if you say the approval, the boss is always slow with approving stuff, right? So you might want to say, okay, this should be an escalation. If that takes too long, you can have these so-called boundary events. You can say, okay, if that takes too long, I want to just go another way. So for example, I have the like an escalation user task, and then I can configure this boundary event. So for example, I could say this should be a duration of, this is now ISO standard, period time 3 seconds, that we see something in the demo, right? Should be a bit more time actually. And something pretty interesting, if you're already familiar with BPMN, you might know that. If you had good eyes, you can see it. I unchecked that, and now it's not a thick line anymore. And that means, so it's dotted, and that means it's non-interrupting. So that means I basically keep that user task and going this path in parallel. Small things, but it's pretty easy to model that in BPMN. That's the point here. That's even not specific for Camunda. It's BPMN standard. So that's pretty easy. But the cool thing is these things are really hard to implement. I mean, that one maybe you can still do in Java hard-coded. I would not recommend it, but it might be possible. But these things are really hard to build. So that's already built in. So I added that one. I run, sorry. I rebuilt my var. Okay. I redeploy it. Interesting thing, feature. Here you already can see that I now have a version process definition. So it recognizes, vacation request has changed, but I keep the old version, deploy a new version. You might have still running process instances waiting for the approval, and they keep going in the original version. New instances are started in the new version. So if I now go to my task list, I kick off a new vacation request. First of all, you see the form now because I entered the form fields earlier. So I can already hand in a name, has a date picker, started. And if I go to cockpit, for example, you can now see that I have 2 running instances in the old version still, and I have 1 running instance in the new version. Okay, so this really versioned. You can already see that the escalation timer has hit. So if I go into that one process instance, I see it's now in the vacation request approval and the escalation at the same time. It's really in parallel. So I have 2 tasks open at the moment. And yeah, again, maybe the last thing, now if I go to the management group list, I have that vacation request. As an user here, I can also see the process model and where I am at the moment. So there you see the difference. I'm currently here, and and I have the form I predefined here. So if I want to work on it, I can really do that now. Okay, and if I approve, okay, I think that's clear. I move on. I get my sys out here. That's, I think, not that thrilling anymore. The escalation task is here as well. There I don't have any form, but I see, okay, I'm in the escalation. I just want to do it for the moment. I complete it. So then, for example, if I look at the process instance, what you also get from the process engine is all the log data, the audit data. So which paths I moved through, and you see as well the timestamps. So at which time I did what. So you basically get information on the whole, on all informations of the history of the process engine. That's what we had on the slide earlier with the KPIs and reporting stuff. That's basically the data source for it. And then you can do a couple of things with it. Just to give examples, you could make very easy statistics like how many process instances you have running, failed, and ended, or you can do stuff like, for example, like a heat map, which paths are really hot, so where do the most process instances run through. So for this example, it would be good if not that much go this way, right? So most of them should be that way, but you see it easily. And you can say, oh, wait a second. We really are inefficient here because we have this task all the time, and these kind of things. These are questions you can then answer with a process engine. Okay, that's it for the demo part. If there's anything interesting or any questions, I'm here till I think 4 or 5 o'clock. Then I have to head to the airport. I'm down at the booth. Ask me anything there. We can go as deep as you like, right? I just scratched on the surface. I hope it got an impression and how we work there. I have a couple of slides actually for ramp up, because there is much more actually to discover there. It was just the tip of the iceberg. I showed you a couple of things in BPMN, but BPMN itself is already really interesting. So even if you don't use Camunda and you want to do some process modeling, please go for BPMN. You should nowadays. And there are a lot of things in it, like I showed you the timers. You see we can wait for messages, so asynchronous stuff. We have sub-processes. We can have error events. That's a really interesting construct, actually, if you say, I'm somewhere in the order management here, and I get a cancellation message. Then I might cancel wherever I am and go this way. That's a so-called event-driven sub-process. So there are a couple of things you can do in BPMN, and that's pretty powerful and really transparent. We are currently, that's now for Camunda, we are currently working or improving the tooling. One really interesting project might be BPMN.io. That's an open source project as well. So we're building a web-based modeler for BPMN, basically. You might want to use that independently of the engine. So just if you want to model BPMN, BPMN.io might be interesting for you. What else do we have? One interesting thing. It was in the agenda as well, but I concentrated on the BPMN demo, actually. But what we are currently implementing as well, or what we have implemented in the latest version, is CMMN. That's another standard. Anybody know CMMN? Okay, I guess so. It's also from the OMG. It's for case management model and notation. And the idea is if you have BPMN, you remember we always have these sequences, right? So you model the activities, but you model the exact order of the activities. So this comes first, then this one, then make a decision and these kind of things. There are processes where this is too structured. Okay, like we have the underwriting as an example where if you want to, for example, health insurance, there's an underwriting process. Somebody decides if you get the health insurance or not, or if you get a surcharge or these kind of things. And this is the so-called underwriter. And he basically knows a lot of the rules, what he has to do. So that doesn't fit in the ordering, right? He want to basically just work, and there are a couple of activities he might want to do, like you want to call the applicant, and actually it's not the underwriting, it's a call center calling the applicant, but the underwriter wants to decide when or if the tele interview has to happen, or he might want to send a letter to the doctor with a questionnaire, or he might want to include some co-underwriter and these kind of things, okay? But it's not a real ordering. And what CMMN does, you still can define all the activities, but you have a couple of attributes. I don't want to explain them in detail here now, but basically you have a couple of attributes controlling which activity is available. Okay, but then they are not automatically pushed to the task list, but you have these underwriter who can basically select which of the stuff he wants to do now or not. So the human has the underwriter here really can decide, and you don't have these clear structure like in BPMN. Might be a bit abstract in the beginning. If you're interested in CMMN, best would be really to come to the booth as well. We have a demo on that, and then it's much easier to understand. But it's interesting. It's a new standard we already have in the engine, and if it's more unstructured, the problem, CMMN might be a good idea. So, and why is this cool? I think you already got the idea. So you don't have this black box BPM suite where you have no idea what you're doing. You have to click through a lot of wizards, and you're really forced to use something proprietary. What we do is really open. Okay, we call it developer friendly. And I think, okay, the vendor login is a problem for the proprietary suites, but I think this passion is really important. What we recognized in the project that the people really like working with it. And I think that's important to get a good result in the project. Yeah. If you're interested in it, camunda.org is the open source project. It's Apache license, so it's easy to get started with it. We have an enterprise subscription model, so this is the business model, what Camunda is driving. We have a community meeting in London coming up, so on the 20th of March. So if you're based in London, that might be interesting to go. Just go to the Camunda.org page or the so-called network, Camunda.org. There you will find the meeting, and then you can just register and just go there. It's for free, and I think it's a good event to get started or to get some information about it. Yeah, basically that's it. I made it quick to have at least 2 or 3 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Is it easy enough to do straight processes in parallel from all to finish and carry on?
Sorry, again, it didn't.
You can do processes in parallel.
Yeah.
And then wait for it to complete.
Yeah.
The case management.
Ah, okay. From the case management perspective.
From the normal BPMN.
Okay. In the normal BPMN, what you can always do is within one process, you can always do parallel path. Not sure if that's the exact question, but if you do something here in parallel, and then let's say we have another user task in parallel, and then what you can do is you can join them late. No, don't have a good moment to join, but then you can have this join point where you basically wait for the different paths to synchronize and move on. So that's possible. But you're actually, that's interesting as well, you're not forced to do the join. So you're not forced to do really a symmetric modeling. That's different to other languages, so that's interesting. Other questions? Yeah?
Is there any rule engine integration?
So the question was, is there any rule engine integration? And from the process engine part or from the BPMN part, there's a so-called business rule task. So what you normally do behind that, you call a rule engine. And we have examples with different rule engines. So one publicly available is for Joules, open source rule engine. In the project, we also did integration with like visual rules or ilog, so IBM or whatever. So it's basically independent on the rule engine you use. From the implementation point of view, we just hook in Java again. So we can call whatever rule engine you like. We're currently discussing if we include some simple rule engine within the product itself. So if you're interested in that, might be worth to drop by the booth because we are interested in the, let's say, the minimal set of requirements for such a component.
Can we use this as part of the existing web application?
Depends on the web application, actually. But it's what technology? It's Java?
Yeah, it's Java.
If it's Java and Tomcat then, or?
It's WebLogic server.
WebLogic, okay. Yes, you can. No, yeah, you easily can do it. I mean, it depends on a couple of decisions you have to make. First of all, there are 2 options. You could either run the engine, what I did with JBoss, as service in the WebLogic, or you can run the engine as library integrated into your WAR. Then you have to start up the engine yourself. It could be done via Spring or other stuff. And And then you might have a look at the libraries you use yourself and if that fits together and whatever. But it's normally easily doable, yeah. Other question, I'm not sure what the time is. Okay, time is up. Not sure if there are any questions left.
Can
No.
this be integrated with other existing like processes like SAP or
Like sorry?
like SAP?
SAP or?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So the question was if there are any out-of-the-box integrations or connectors to other systems,
Yeah,
right?
For example, like if I am using this in my web application, if I initiate the request should go to the SAP inbox.
Mm-hmm. Ah, okay. That's even a more interesting question. So let me answer the two questions as the last questions, and then I'm still here. The first question is, do we have like connectors out of the box to different systems like SAP? And there the answer is no, we don't. So we have connectors to like generic connectors for SOAP or REST. You can use out of the box, but we don't have an SAP connector or the like. What we normally do is we just hook in either like JCode directly or an integration framework like Camel or even an ESB.
So we can use REST. SAP provides REST.
Okay, then it's easy. Then you can use REST. The second question was interesting. Can we use the SAP inbox for showing the task? And that's actually a use case a couple of customers do. Not with SAP, I know it with a Siebel or even one with 6, so with the host screen, which is pretty cool to see Camunda task in a host screen. What you can do there, if you have these user tasks, we can hook in listeners, so pieces of code at different points in the process. So for example, you can hook it in when creating a task. You can always call a piece of Java code, which calls the REST API of SAP to create the task, hand over some data. And then we need basically some event when the task is finished in SAP to get that, so we complete the task and move on. But that's easily doable. I mean, and then you reuse the existing task component you already have, which is normally, if that's already in use, a good idea, because then it's easier to get started. You don't need a new task list, and it's really easier for the users to get started. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, time is up. Thank you very much for the time. I'm still here and at the booth if you have any questions. Thank you for coming. If you want a poster, we have it at the booth.